Jaron, thanks for joining us today. Jaron is president of Solomon Brothers, an elite jeweler in Atlanta, and actually most of Georgia at this point. You're like taking over the state,
Trying to.
trying to. Give us a little bit of your background.
you know, Grew up was very blessed to, grow up in a home where my parents took education very seriously. So got very good education growing up. And when my brothers and I were going through private school education, this was at a time that my dad was really building up Solomon Brothers, through the 80s and the 90s was kind of the building blocks, those 20 years. And then eventually, obviously, got better and better. After finding a couple of key marketing strokes and things of that nature, he kind of found his stride. But for a long time there, he was struggling, but he never gave up, on our education. So fast forward, went to the University of Georgia, went through the Terry College of Business, which I owe a lot to, just in terms of kind of creating my critical thinking as far as business goes, and going through the marketing and the management school within Terry really helped me as I came into this role, because although I wasn't president of Solomon Brothers by title, when I was basically 23 years old, my dad was going through a stem cell transplant, and he was diagnosed with multiple myeloma years before that, but started to battle that. So I came in. It was kind of one of those crazy things of like, just start opening up the safes, start handling the clients, and we'll see what happens, right? Is dad going to get better? Is he going to get healthy? We're not really sure. Obviously he could still talk and he could still communicate, and he could still help out kind of from the hospital bed, from his bed. Not going to go into a whole stem cell transplant lesson here, but basically you're just shooting the immune system. So I mean, he was starting over like a baby. We just started from there. So I was calling him every day, being like, where is everything? Like, what is going on in here? What's a diamond? It's kind of like, I mean, it was truly, throw somebody in and just see if they sink or swim. And again, I really do go back to just the critical thinking part of my education, not necessarily the finance class or the accounting class and all that nonsense. Like, it was just the critical thinking skills that I was taught growing up within the home, within the schools. And I just kind of made my way through it, with his help and his guidance from home. And um, fast forward, unfortunately, in 2016, when he passed away, that's kind of when it became official. But really, up until the day that he passed, for the most part, he could communicate, and essentially kind of, he was the shadow, right, president, CEO, that I was just kind of working through. And I'm very grateful I had, those kind of 3.5, 4 years to kind of pick his brain, little by little, and spent time with him a lot, trying to figure it out. So although he wasn't here with me in the office, very helpful. I don't know what would have happened. Probably the impetus for what you guys are doing here and why we're talking today, of like, what, God forbid, had he passed away, in 2013 and not 2016, what would have happened? I honestly don't even want to think about that. Not only from the emotional side, of course, from our family side, but just from the business side. I have no idea what would have happened. I mean, there was no playbook for it. My dad, his two brothers, right, from South Africa, first generation in America, first generation entrepreneurs, um, you know, didn't think about what is going to happen, right? Because when you start with nothing, you're risking everything. What the hell do you need a plan for, right? But then you become successful, and you're like, well, what the hell do I need a plan for? I didn't do it when I wasn't doing well. Now, why change it, right? And
Yeah.
obviously that was a bit of a wake up call. But so in 2016, I took over, um, as the president of the company by title, but really started continuing to do a lot of the same stuff that I was doing. But I still needed a lot of help. There was still a lot of learning, to be done. A lot of people that I kept on because they had come along with the business with my dad that I ended up getting rid of. And when you start getting rid of some folks, you start uncovering, certain bodies that they didn't want you to see. And thank God nothing crazy, just really inefficiencies. And that's kind of what I think I've brought to the table that has also allowed me to open up two more stores. We opened up our second store, after being open for 38 years or whatever it was. We opened in 2019, our Alpharetta location, excuse me. And then last year, we opened up our Peachtree City, Noonan, Coweta County store over in Sharpsburg. And, we've been able to do that, been able to grow slowly and smart, by having less inventory, more turn, all of that kind of stuff. But my becoming a savant on inventory was really interesting and, an incredible journey for me. That that's something that you don't hear about in school. You don't hear about aged inventory and turn levels, and you know they use the word cash flow a lot in school, right? But you're like, well, it's just numbers on a page. It's not real. So when you really get into it and you're like, oh shit, I owe the bank money every month and then I want to make money. So how does that work? And so I really became, I think my biggest strength so far, has been learning the inventory, learning how to scale down, but yet scale up revenue, and finding different ways to do that. So long-winded way to answer your question there, but
Yeah. Now, when your dad was running the business and you took over it, did anybody else have the safe codes? I mean, if God forbid something happened to him one night, was he the only one with the safe codes?
No, thank God, no.
Okay.
That's
All right.
my uncles who were in the business at the time did
Also,
have safe
okay. All
codes.
right. So
Yes.
there's some redundancy there. And now, you're blessed to work with your mom and your uncle. Was your mom involved in the business initially, or did she get
Yeah.
involved? Okay, so
No,
she
she
was
was there
always
the whole
there.
time. Yep.
Awesome.
Whole
And
time.
your uncle was there the whole time.
Yep.
So you really had two people that had a lot of knowledge about the business. I know you have two brothers.
Yep.
It sounds kind of like just by default that you just kind of ended up, taking over it and assisting. Are they younger, older? Where do you fit into the?
Yep. Older. That was kind of one of the things is I've got two older brothers that actually had careers going. At that point in time, I was fresh out of school, peddling
So it's
wine and
like
liquor,
it's like you're it.
And so yeah, it was I had no career at the time. I just had aspirations of what I wanted to do, but it's it was kind of easy to point and shoot and say, hey, you know what, you can come open up the safe. You're capable of that, Jaron. Like you can't screw that up. And so,
And so your brothers they had their own careers. They weren't interested to come back and be a part of Solomon Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really, an interest type of level at the time. It was more just one of these things where it was a need, right? In our minds, my dad was going to get better. He was going to go through this transplant. It was going to work. Everything was going to happen. And then I was, going to go off and do something else. And in my head in 2013, I mean, that was literally what I had in mind. I love to sell. And so, I just wanted to go sell something.
You step in and you're right out of college. Um, you're the young kid on the block. You're the kid.
Yeah.
How does someone step into that role and navigate? Two-part question. One with your mom and your uncle, right? That are there. They're owners of the organization. They've been there. And then you've got the team. And it's like, who's this new kid? How do you establish and make that successful, the authority?
Yeah. So, a lot of people say the line, work smarter, not harder, right? And stuff like that. But, sometimes in the beginning, you gotta you gotta show that you want it and that you're here to learn. And so, I mean, I really pounded it, for a while there, and was the first to show up, the last to leave, and just tried to lead by example to say, hey, you know what? This guy's last name is Solomon. He's 23 years old. He's just given everything. How do you kind of prove to the team that that's not the case? And you're never really going to prove that. And at the end of the day, it's also a true statement. Like I kind of came in understanding, like, I was given this. Like, how can you say you weren't? Like, my last name is Solomon because my dad is sick. That's why I'm here. So that was not a nice thing of why I'm here. But the fact of the matter is, I'm all of a sudden a Solomon in the building. And so how do you lead by example? So I worked extremely hard and just made sure that from the little things, in retail, it's there's a lot of grind in retail. And so for me, it was get the merchandise in the cases, make sure when the staff walked in that they were like, oh, wow, well, why is this out already? I don't have to put out merchandise this morning. And for a long time there, I was getting in at like 6 a.m., when we only opened at 10. And, I was putting it out in those days, the pre-COVID days, we were a couple days a week, we were open until 8 o'clock at night and things like that. And, so I was here until 10 o'clock. I was working the 6 to 10 shift, and people started making jokes about, oh, does Jaron sleep here and this, that, and the other. And, you know, I'm not saying that that's the best recipe for everybody, but in a retail world where grinding it out is a thing, when you're dealing with retail clients, I think that was a real good way to earn everybody's respect, whether or not I was doing a good job or a bad job. Earning my mom, and at the time my two uncles, earning their respect in what I was trying to do. I think that they come from an old school mentality of showing up and working hard. So I think that kind of played into it as well for them. And then like I said, I love selling. So how do you actually make money in the retail business? Well, you sell a product. And so I was on the floor. If there was any paperwork I needed to get done, it got done before 10 or it got done after close. But during the hours of operation, I was on the floor literally every single minute of every single day. And if I could help someone close a sale, I was on it. I mean, but before and after, I was taking my classes at GIA. I was learning about the diamond business, and I wasn't afraid to ask questions. I was not shy about not knowing anything. And that wasn't necessarily a conscious decision. I'm not going to give myself credit for being wise at the time. Now I realize it was actually kind of a wise thing to do, but I don't know. I wanted to soak it up. And I was um, I've wanted my dad's approval for a long time growing up. And we grew up in one of those kind of tougher homes of like, my dad was a world-class athlete back in South Africa. So obviously sports was a big thing. So when my brothers and I would do anything, unless we were like winning the championship or making an all-star team, like it wasn't very impressive what we were doing. And so, we kind of grew up in this home of really wanting my dad's approval. And, I think that, in a healthy way, pushed me here. So I just was soaking up every bit of information. Anyone that would talk to me, I would talk to. And so it was a lot of fun learning. For the first time in my life, I enjoyed learning. Actually, I wasn't the best in school. I know I talked about it earlier, but it wasn't my favorite thing. But I really enjoyed learning here, and I think that's how I got everybody on my side. Is I was just soaking up everything, and if my salesperson knew more than I did, I went to them for help. Like, why not? Because I just want to help them. So that's kind of how that went those first 3 years for sure.
Given what you know now, if you were in your dad's position, knowing what you know, what would you change or what would you do if you were your dad, kind of leading into this? How would you make it easier I know your kids are young, but how would you
Yeah.
make it easier for your kids?
Wow. A lot of different ways to go with that, but the word planning obviously comes straight to mind. That's something you hear a lot of people talk about. But truthfully, getting a roadmap and understanding that, just because we were a one store operation at the time, so you're kind of like, you're small, what do you need policies and procedures for? What is that? Why is that important? Um, and the bottom line is, if he could go back, I believe, and certainly as I go forward, um, you got to just have everything laid out and documented, and you take for granted that you could train somebody really well. What's in your head, but one that that's not there anymore. And so, I think if he could go back, it would be just to write down a list of vendors that are trusting and that you would use. And, we, I still today, I run into people at a trade show or something like that, and they'll be like, "Oh, I used to do a ton of business with your dad. He was amazing, this, that, and the other. I'm so sorry for your loss and this, that, and the other." And it's like, dude, I would, if I knew you existed, I would have called you or something, like we could have done business together. Um, but the diamond business is a little funny that way. It's, he met these people in Antwerp and in Israel and
Right.
in South Africa and Moscow, and it's like, these guys are just, dealers at a table somewhere. They're not,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
when I came in, even if I wanted to travel, I wouldn't have known where to even go, or who to talk to or who to call. So I think, when somebody makes all these relationships, I think planning and saying, "Hey, I've put in all this time and this effort and
Yeah.
built all this goodwill with so
Yeah.
many people," that's like first and foremost. I can figure out how a P&L goes and like figure out how to balance
Yeah.
the books. That's easy stuff, honestly. But the relationships that are built over the years, and to
Yeah.
say, "Hey, you can trust this person, you can't
Yeah.
trust this person,"
Exactly. That's what I was
that
going
would
to
be
say.
helpful.
Yeah. A vendor list with notes.
Yeah, that would be in the retail world. I think first and foremost, that would have been the most helpful thing that could have happened for me. And then the rest of the usual suspects probably, but for me in this business, that would have been incredible.
And
Yeah.
we see it's very common for, generation one entrepreneurs. Your main priority is to build a successful business that's profitable, that can put food on the table for the family, and keep that train going, not necessarily do the processes and procedures and document those key relationships like you're mentioning.
Yeah, exactly.
Jaron, I know that your hopes and dreams for the business is not to build this empire and give it to your kids. Um, Many second generation uh, owners, entrepreneurs struggle with, do I keep dad's or mom's legacy going? It's more than just a business. There's an emotional attachment to it. How do you weigh all that, and what do you struggle with there?
This is a big struggle of mine. And, one of the reasons it's a big struggle is because my dad never really made his intentions overly clear. He was very, very humble, probably too humble, to his family. Probably didn't tell his story enough, um, because it's an incredible success story. But he never really expressed to us that, listen, my dream would be for this name to continue on forever.
Yeah.
That I want to be, because as long as this name is here, in my opinion, at least my generation, in our faith, we name after the dead, not the living. So my son's name is Ivan Solomon, my dad's name. And so, like, as I've had children, and it does become more nostalgic to be like, man, the greatest gift I feel like I could ever do is for my dad's legacy to always continue. But he never expressed that. So, that's why, whenever I've talked to certain folks, talk to you, Thor, it's never really been like a key point for me, to be like, all right, I want to build this thing up so it can support multiple generations and this, that, and the other. But on the other hand, here I am naming my kid Ivan Solomon, um, and that kind of starts to play into your mind a little bit of, man, my dad started off with, the company was ISL, which was Ivan Solomon Limited. That's our wholesale company. And so, like, how cool would it be one day if like Ivan Solomon came back, right? He's back. And I don't know. So that weighs on me heavily. But you also want to, take care of your kids and make sure that, hey, they can do whatever they want to do. You know, you don't want to force them into the business. I think a lot of people, you know, go with that. I obviously wasn't forced into this business, you know, but it kind of happened by happenstance. So I don't know if I would have come into it or whatnot. That choice never really got put in front of me. I'm very happy that I'm here, though. Obviously, I love what I do, but um, you know, I think that the answer to that question is going to evolve for me on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a yearly basis. And, you know, it's one of those deals where, you know, if the business becomes successful enough on its own, that probably, yes, I would love for him to come in. But if it's one of those deals where he has to grind, you know, and you could sell it, like, what do you do? Right. It's just one of these conversations that who knows what's going to happen. It's, you know, do you want to take care of your family with money? Or do you want to take care of your family with legacy and purpose? And, you know, I feel very lucky that that what I do for a living is I get to preserve my father's name and his legacy and what he built and what he stood for. So emotionally, a good day at the office for me feels really, really good. And that, you know, can't it's unfortunate that a lot of people can't feel that feeling. You know, a lot of people, even super successful, you know, you work at Southern Company and you close a big deal and you make $1 million a year or whatever it is. Like, you're probably happy and you're doing great, but like, you know, you're still, if you made $1 million, you just made freaking probably $20 million for somebody else. So it's kind of like, you know, no matter what I make, you know, I make it for this family. And, you know, that's a great feeling. So, you know, that I don't think people quite understand it. I don't think that second generation understands coming into the business. They just see a successful business by the first generation, and they don't understand the emotion maybe behind carrying it on. You know, but I toy with that a little bit. I also went through a very emotional experience, right? My father passed away at 62, right? I was 26 years old, like, you know, so I obviously have a lot more emotion tied to this maybe than some others that their dads maybe want to hand them the business, and then they're still alive or this, that, and the other. So I don't know about that, but emotionally, it's incredible being here. So long-winded answer of I don't know what I'm going to do is the answer.
But every day you get to put money in your uncle's pocket and your mother's pocket and your
Yeah,
brothers through dividends and their ownership in the company, and that's got to be really rewarding. You
hugely. Yeah.
Yeah, you end up going into this business by happenstance. Do you struggle, or is there times where you know, you never got a chance to just choose your own path? Do you find it less rewarding that, well, it was kind of given to me, so I didn't do it myself, kind of? I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
You're explaining it very well, and 100% I feel that way. You know, sort of a part of like wanting to like show my dad, like, hey man, like, you know, you did one store, like I've got three now. I'm going to more, like, so 1,000,000%. There's a huge piece of me that you know, is fighting within on wanting to feel successful, right? You know, at the beginning when it was one store, it was like, all right, well, we're just preserving this. Like, I better not drop in sales because he was doing, you know, this amount of sales. How can I not be doing that amount? So, and when you keep up, like, you're just keeping up, you're not succeeding, you're surpassing. So, I think that, no question about it, I felt a real need. I feel a real need, um, to continue to grow and to go for that purpose alone, just to say, hey, I know how to I scaled a business. It became more successful under me, and I know my dad would be so proud to know that. So I don't mind saying that out loud. um, you know, there's always going to be that you know, thought of, well, you know, you started on third base, right? You didn't have to go to first base, second base, third base. Like, you know, I started with this incredible name. I mean, when I was going out to Alpharetta, everybody wanted me in their shopping center. Everyone wanted me. Like, they were like Solomon Brothers, Solomon Brothers. Like, that's a household name here in the city. And so I'm so proud of that, of what my dad built there. And I have no problem using that to my advantage. And but yeah, is there a part of me that says, hey, do I want to go open up a store, in a totally different state, that starts from scratch, that just says, hey, do you know how to open up your own business? Do you know how to be successful on your own 2 feet with no help of, oh, they already know the name, there's already brand equity there? Yeah, there's absolutely that in me.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've been blessed to see the journey over the last 4 or 5 years working with you. And, in the beginning, it was, hey, we need you to keep the lights on and we need you to keep the things going and open the safes. Uh, the things you're doing now weren't there 4 or 5 years ago. And
yeah,
I think you answered that question great. You want to make your own mark, you can still make your own mark within the company that you had the head start with, because that would be completely on you. A new location in a different state is like starting a business from scratch.
yeah, 100%. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. So, and there's nothing wrong with not doing that either. I think everyone's got to find their own
Right.
kind of success from within. And like you said, Thor, you and I have been working together for a long time. And that's one of the other things that I would also just say to second generation is, don't be afraid to get outside help, and make sure that you're picking other people's brains. And the minute my dad passed away, I hired a consultant. Further on, that consultant filled its role, and then hired Thor over here, and wanted to make sure that I kept learning how to be a better leader. And you can see, some people I think get blinded by maybe, oh, this was given to me, so anything I do here doesn't count. It's like, I definitely have felt, that not only because of opening up a couple more stores, but even if it was just one store, again, getting things more efficient, understanding the inventory, putting more money in people's pockets. At the end of the day, if you can grow the bottom line from what it was to what it is now, then that's a scoreboard in my mind. And that's if the bottom line was bringing in hypothetically $1 million and you're now bringing in $2 million, you've doubled it, and that's success. Like, that's not easy to do. So no, I've definitely been able to find wins from within, and still 1,000,000% appreciate why I'm here, and how the seat was even built in the first place. So that's okay.
You're still battling whether, to try to include Ivan and grooming Ivan into the next CEO. I mean, you're still battling that. How do you tell me about that process, on a week in, week out basis? Does it just pop in your mind and you kind of suppress it? Is it something that you're talking about with your spouse? What's going on there?
Yeah, no, good question. Honestly, I love bringing the kids into the office with me. Brightens up the office anyway, shows that it's a family business. And every time they come into the office, and he's like, "Give me the keys. Let me go." And I'm like, "All right, there we go." So as they get older, I think it'll be very interesting, if I bring them in here, let them behind the case at, start selling at 13, 14 years old, because
It'd
I
be
just,
great.
it would be great. And
You just put a little sign over him. I want to go to college, but daddy needs another sale.
daddy needs help. But I'm a firm believer that everyone should work retail at some point in their life, even no matter what they go and do. Retail is a different beast, and everybody should experience it. So I'm gonna, my focus right now is just making sure that they grow up the right way and get the right exposures. But I absolutely will bring them into the business very early on in their lives, so that they can just experience what it's like, experience what it's like to earn their own money, and then, how to balance that money at 12 years old or 13 years old, and, kind of figure all that stuff out. But as far as, hey, he's going to go off to college, or, whatever, and is he going to come back into the business? Is my daughter going to come into it? Are I got two older brothers, they've got kids, a lot of girls in the family of this generation. So, could there be husbands, that aren't the last name Solomon, that want to come into the business? I think about all of that. That's something my wife and I talk about a good bit. And, I sometimes do joke with people that there's 7 grandkids, for my dad and my mom. And, so that means I need 7 stores, so they can all have a store to run. And I jokingly say that, but I also say it with, I have a friend of mine who runs a really good jeweler in Florida, and has 11 stores, and has his son-in-laws in the business and his sons in the business. And I see it working on another level. And that's, I'm not saying that I'm working for that, but I'm also not saying that I'm working against it. And I would kind of say that this idea, I think, will all work out. That my goal to expand is essentially a little bit to prove my success, and to prove that I can do it. And the fruits of that might be that there's also room for a next generation to come into the business, whether it's my kids, my brother's kids, or whatnot. I still see this as my dad's company. So, to me, it definitely obviously would be a struggle in the sense of like who wants to come in, who does what. And there's a real sense of entitlement, obviously. And my generation and the generation below me is probably going to be way worse. It's that will be a very interesting battle. But because I still see it as my dad's company in that first generation, I'm almost skipping my generation and saying, okay, what about this third generation? It's not just my son and my daughter, it's my other 5 nieces and nephew. And then my uncle has kids, and they just didn't want to come into the business. They had no interest in it. So it just kind of just turned out to be just me. And so it's really going to be very fascinating if this does become a multi-generational business. I don't even want to think about how complex that's going to be.
Baby
but I
steps,
probably
one
should
step
start.
at a time.
I should probably start, and I already have, like, mentally. But my dad was he was an incredibly good giver. Charity, was off the charts. You know, never gave loud, always gave softly, and just had that gene in his body. And so I'd like to embody that for the next generation. And whoever wants to do it, I would love to build something where I could find space for everybody.
So your mom is in Atlanta?
Yeah.
And your brothers, are they in the Georgia area?
Yeah.
And then your
Yeah,
uncle, is he in the US or no?
Yeah, my uncle's here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are y'all able to kind of get together and do kind of any annual retreats with the family and kind of give yourself some space to kind of talk about this?
We don't. Again, it's kind of interesting because my dad was the head of the company, right? And he was so far the head of the company that's why I even became the head of the company. Like, my uncles weren't even considered. They didn't even consider themselves to be a head of the company, because it was like, it's Ivan's. And so because I was in touch with him every day, it just morphed into that role. And so because of the traumatic, kind of passing, because again, we thought that he was going to get better and better, and we won't relitigate that. But the fact that he passed and it was kind of traumatic, Trevor, we haven't, I don't want to say we haven't recovered from it, but it's almost like we're going to have to peel back some wounds, in order to move forward. And that's going to have to happen. But and just amazing family planning, obviously, we're just going to avoid it. So, not my recommendation. You didn't, that's not, but,
There's a plan, just avoid.
yeah. The plan is to avoid, which is not a good plan. And we've already, we've done things like we didn't have, we weren't recording minutes or doing board meetings. We're doing that now. We didn't have good buyout clauses so that if something does happen, we have all that now. So I've certainly pushed the ball forward on planning, as far as making sure that if anything crazy happens, that we're covered for that. But as far as this long term future planning. My nieces are turning 12 next month. I have twin nieces. They're the oldest of that generation. And you're right, though. Before you know it, they're 18, they're off to college. Before you know it, they're graduating. And, then everyone's starting to follow behind them, right? So we're not taking seriously enough. And I'll put this on me, by the way, so you can quote me on me saying this. I'm not taking it seriously enough that, and I'm being a little bit avoiding for sure on the fact that they're turning 12. What do we need to talk about this for? But you do.
It's human nature. Don't beat yourself up too much.
Yeah. And you're young. I mean, what would happen tomorrow if something happened to you?
Yeah, so I mean, that's my number one, in my opinion, my fiduciary responsibility of this company is to build a team here that if something happened to me, that Solomon Brothers will still continue and still go, and made huge steps in that direction. And finally, spending the money on payroll to have safety and peace of mind, and also with that growth. I mean, all of these things have synergy to it. I'm not just spending just in case I die. But I feel a hell of a lot better spending a bunch of money on people that can work in the business than spending a bunch of money on a life insurance policy. In case you die, it's kind of like, hey, if something were to happen, my best success, as my great, and you can quote me, the best consultant Thor, has, is if I were to leave, the business tomorrow, could it run without me? And at the moment, the answer is still no, but it's so much closer to a yes in 2025 than it was certainly in 2013, and certainly even in 2019 or 2020. So, and I realize that, success can mean that answer is yes. Can the business run without you? If the answer is yes, that actually might make you the most successful leader. Instead, in my mind, many years ago, that was the least successful, right? It's like, well, shit, this was just given to me. Now I'm going to have other people run it. And then, like, how does that make me successful? And, you can't discount what makes a good leader a good leader. So
it's easier said than done to build a team around you that can essentially run it when you're not there. That you could take a month-long, 2-month-long vacation, or just not be in the store for a while, and it's just running just as seamlessly, just as profitable as if you're not there. I asked my wife the other day, I was like, I haven't done, even me, good enough job of communicating. This is the blueprint we've laid out, et cetera.
Yeah.
I said, hey, if I passed, what would you do with the CPA firm? She's like, oh, I'd sell it. I was like, that's the last thing you'd want to do. It's like everything is in place.
Yeah.
Here are the top people you speak with, and then you just stabilize and keep on operating. And to your point, I love that you mentioned this, that list of key vendors and key partnerships, is so huge. And so we developed that list of key vendors, key partnerships. And even if you did want to sell, here are the key players in the industry that I think are really top notch and have the same values that we do, that, hey, approach them to sell, because they're going to treat the team that we have in place just like we treat them, et cetera. And they're not just kind of looking for just to bleed the company dry with profits.
Yeah. And here's the
100%.
advisor that's going to help you sell, because nothing makes a worse seller than a spouse,
right,
man or a woman. There's too much emotion involved in it. That was a packed 5 minutes.
Yeah, Jaron, you're awesome, man.
Man, you win a prize, man. That was phenomenal.
Well, thanks a lot, Jaron.
All right, guys.
Yes, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right.
Thanks.